What, should we start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, welcome. I hope you're ready for a bunch of fun-filled activities for exercise, because we'll do at least one. Okay. And if you have back problems or something, just remain seated, because I don't want a phone call from Liz or anybody else from K-State saying we're suing you for a herniated disc or whatever. Okay. So, why don't you stand? We'll do our exercise first.
Right now?
Okay. Sure. Now, I want to make one thing real clear. They did a study for elderly people, and one of the activities that we're going to do in the next 30 seconds, if you do with your eyes closed at home, they say that it will ward off dementia. Now, the study didn't say why, but it made total sense, because the part that you'll be doing is basically you're going to be doing something like this. If you do it with your eyes closed, you're using the temporal lobe in your brain, right? And for whatever reason, a lot of dementia sets in that area. So it made sense that you're kind of warding it off. Good? Okay, we'll start with little circles. Cha, cha, cha. And then feel the energy. Nice. And then big circles. Now we get to the, if you need to hold on to a chair, you can. But what you do want to do is make little circles with your right leg and foot. Okay? And then gradually, yeah, there you go. And then don't kick the lady going down the aisle. And then gradually a little bigger. And then switch. Okay? So the left leg and foot. Okay? And then feel the energy coursing through your body. Okay? And then, again, don't do this one if you've got back issues, but what we're going to do is touch the ground, touch the sky, touch the flowers, touch the birds, and then switch. Touch the ground. Now you're doing working your left side. Okay. Yeah, just a little water down Tai Chi. Now inhale.
And everybody can see us.
Again. And last one, make a nice big heart that you can pull everybody in the room so we can study together. All together. Love. Exercise. Okay. So, now we just did. Oh yeah, sorry. And then there was two. So my wife was gracious enough to go to Aldi's last night. We've already done exercises, so the physicality of our body is intact, but now the hunger might set in too. We provided us with a nice coat. But I will give treats if you answer with 100% accuracy. Okay. All right, so welcome. We've already done our exercise, right? And the background stories. Why exercise, right? Why? Now, the K through 12, who's in K through 12 in here? Because I'm kind of preaching to the choir. Okay, so we'll use you guys as an example. K through 12, there's exercise, right? Yeah. And I spent a lot of time, I spent 6 years of that's where I cut my teeth in teaching, is in Japan. And we did a lot of exercise in Japan, and at City Hall, Smokey, you taught in Japan? Okay. And so at City Hall, you know, when I'd spend like an afternoon there once a week, and everybody would get out of their chairs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was called Tai Sogi? You know, and they put it on the speakers, and everyone would get out of their chair and do little exercises, you know, for 5 minutes, and then go back to work. And my whole life, I mean, I grew up on a small farm in northwestern Wisconsin, and exercise was a huge part of my life. And then I got back to the States, in academia, no exercise. What's wrong here? And I felt kind of out of sorts. You know, first place was UW-Madison, okay? I was a grad student, back to teaching. It's like, no exercise is going on. You know, it's late afternoon, and the students are salivating on their paper, not because they love writing, but because the head's going down. And so I thought, yeah, let's bring in some exercise, okay? And then, you know, I started thinking, if you've read the memoirs of our presidents, right? They're always out in the morning running or doing something. And a lot of them will write, yeah, it gives them that sense of confidence to start the day, but it also gets them mentally sharp. You look at the astronauts. They go through that intense training. Half of it is so that they can, survive in space, but a lot of it is, too, that mental training. Army SEAL, Navy SEAL friends. I only have 2 that have now retired, but they said that same thing, the whole idea of that mental training and physicality. Okay? So I'm thinking all these things, why not bring it into the classroom? Right? So, and you look at it, and it's a weird concept because you're asking your students to sit and think for an hour, and you're cutting off circulation at the knees and at the waist. So how much blood and oxygen is getting to the brain, really? Not a lot, right? So no wonder, the question that we always ask, or I always ask, why aren't my students getting it? Right? Why did they forget that? And then after the exercise thing kicked in, I was like, they're not forgetting it as much anymore. And I can actually, now granted, my back is turned during a portion of the class, but I can tell you how many yawns I saw last fall, with the exercise going on at the beginning. There were 3, okay, in 3 different classes. So now there probably were more, okay, my back is turned, but I remember counting 3, okay, because of the exercise. So, are you ready? Okay, so there are 3, I'm giving you these 3 case studies, not to bore you, but hopefully they'll invigorate you and make you excited. And change things in the classroom. So the first one, how many of you know about, it's Central High School in Naperville, Illinois. Do you know where Naperville is? So Illinois is kind of like this, right? So Chicago, it's a west suburb in Chicago. So a few years back, they had what was called a 0 PE hour. Are you familiar with that? Okay. So Coach Duncan, our coach, he was the PE teacher, he created this class that would start 1 hour before the classes started in Naperville. Mainly it was for kids that were having issues with reading. Okay? So they got them to do all sorts of physical things before they entered the classroom. Now, for example, if they did basketball, it wasn't 5-on-5, it was just 2-on-2. So there was maximum utility of that hour time. Soccer, it wasn't 11-on-11, again, it was 2-on-2. So they were constantly working it to get that heart rate going at a certain rate. That was kind of the key. Okay? At the end of the semester, they tested them, and the kids that didn't go through the program, they increased by how much percent do you think?
70.
Oh, that didn't do it.
5. 3. 5.
0.
10, he said 10. Carolyn? Yes, okay. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Just kidding. So, yeah, 10% for those who didn't do it. But those that went through the 0-hour PE, how much?
27.
20. Well, 17, but we will say 20. But isn't that what the president says? Well, I want to vote by 19%. That's as good as 30, right? Yeah. So at any rate, no, 17 exactly. But that was the first year of study, so I think it's gone up since then. Okay, but that's quite a bit, right? 17%. Enough to tell you the following fact, which is amazing. A lot of the schools, according to this man, John J. Rady, who's written a wonderful book that I'll show you later called Spark. If you ever get a chance, it's wonderful. Doesn't matter. It's called Spark, how something like how physical exercise can increase the performance of your brain. Okay, but if you just Google Spark or Amazon Spark, is that a verb now? Okay, Amazon something. So if you Amazon Spark, it'll come up. At any rate, from that book, you'll find out that, I didn't know this, that a lot of the schools in Chicago will take their ESL students out during testing time. So that because the scores will go down, obviously, in the average. But Naperville was, I think, the only school that did not take their students out. And still, their rankings and their testing were on par with Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and Finland. It was pretty amazing. The principal thought, is it the 0-hour PE? Let's make it no longer a volunteer hour, but let's just have it as a mandatory hour. So it's going strong. The PE coaches are going around the country now, I think, giving little seminars on how to set something like this up. Okay. So I know every ESL institute can't do that, but we can do little things in the classroom. And again, the K through 12 people, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because there is physicality, right? But my daughter complains there's not enough exercise. She's in kindergarten now. She says, we only get PE once a week. I'm like, what? So, Schmidt-Casau. Okay, anybody familiar with the bicycle study? Oh, you are? Awesome. Okay. So they did you want to tell it?
Well, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
With the women on the bicycles and they were studying language?
Yeah, German gals studying Polish, right?
Oh, I thought they were Americans studying German the way I read it.
Okay.
I just read a little more. It was in my fitness magazine. It was like
Okay.
a little...
Well, you know, it's interesting, because those magazines that, yeah, if you read like a third or fourth source, they get things changed around. I've noticed that a lot of stuff, and I finally, you get back to the origin. So it was a study done where you had, I think it was 105 German women studying Polish, okay? And they had 3 different groups, okay? First group, they just had them listen to some music, relax, and after the relaxation, they studied the Polish, okay? Second group, they had them on a little exercise bike, okay? Got the neurotransmitters running, more blood to the brain, more oxygen to the brain, and then after that, they learned their vocabulary, okay? Third group, they got them on the exercise bike, okay? Relatively slowly, so they weren't straining anything, and to the point where they almost forgot that they were on the exercise bike, okay? And they studied the vocabulary, okay? Now you know where this is going, right? My question I'm going to ask you is what? Which group? Yeah. So the relaxation group was great or kind of so-so or kind of dismal?
Dismal.
Yeah, dismal. Okay. The second group did pretty well. Okay. And that's what I do in classes. You know, I get them up and exercising. But then after the study, I started thinking I've got to do more because the third group outperformed everybody. Okay. And I think what they did is they did a comprehension test a day later, I think 8 days later, and then a month later. So the retention rate was pretty amazing. Now, there's a reason for that I'll tell you after the pop quiz, okay? Why that happened physiologically, okay? Good? Okay. Now, I read something recently, and I can't tell you what business it was, but they actually got, and they did a little study, under everybody's desk at work. It was a cubicle office, but they got little wheels, so that they could actually ride a bike when they wanted to. And for the study, they timed the section that they did that. There was less chatter going on, more work going on, and fewer mistakes. Okay? So it was a neat little thing that I don't know, I'll email me and I'll try to find what company that was. But yeah, they just did little exercise bikes under their table, which makes sense, right? Yeah. And again, the reason why we'll hit momentarily. The winter case study, anybody familiar with that one? Again, it was in Germany. Auf Deutsch. Eine kleine Nachmusiker auf der Straße. Right? That's what my daughter says. Okay. So again, it was a basic study where this one was a little different than the bicycle because they had them exercise. Okay, and then they did the vocabulary. This was the group that studied German and English. Okay, which now makes me question because those Germans start studying English early, don't they? So I have to look at that study a little more carefully. But at any rate, what percent did they acquire the vocabulary higher than the group that didn't do it?
20.
Who said 20? My God, amazing. Did you read that study?
Yes.
This nice woman bought all of us coffee 2 years ago when we came up here. She took us to the coffee house.
And that's what you get today.
And there you go. She said, hey, you guys need coffee. Yeah, again, it's pretty amazing. I mean, 20% is quite a bit, right? Okay. So all these studies are out there, and at the same time, you know, places across the country, students come into a classroom and we're sitting down, right? And I can never figure that out. Now, in ancient Greek, Socrates took his troops and they walked around, right? And then Confucius walked around with his followers. And the great Zen haiku writers like Basho and Isu, they all traveled, right? Thinking on our feet. Right? Here's a question for you. Way back when we were still a hunter-gatherer society, what is the average number of miles that men walked per day, and what's the average number of miles women walked per day? Any guesses? Chocolate involved.
Like 10.
Per day, yeah.
Per day.
Yeah.
50.
I was going to say 50.
Miles.
15.
15. Close. Go down a little. I mean, and again, this is a rough guess. I'm not giving a.
You can't have 10.
Yeah, 10. You said 10.
I think we both did.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, well, the men 10 to 12, and again, they've done this from what is it, the carbon dating in the bones. You know how many miles they probably walked, and then looked at. There's a guy called Wagner, and he's done a lot of research on the activity of of groups. Okay, women, how much women? And remember, they're taking care of the kids and they're doing the gathering. Yeah, 20 probably with everything involved, right? So they didn't count those little steps. But yeah, they say 6 to 7. Okay, but that's a lot, right? I mean, still 6 to 7, 10 to 12 per day. So it's almost like exercise is literally in our DNA, and that's how the brain evolved through millions of years. So, pop quiz. Are you ready? Yes. Now, some of these might be trick questions. There are no benefits to exercising before class.
False.
Okay, I'll give you a little prep. Okay. Exercise actually promotes neurogenesis. What's neurogenesis?
Yeah.
Yeah, birth of neurons. Good. Okay. And I'm gonna go back after we're done with the quiz 2, 4, and 7. I want to talk a little bit about before we go forward. 2 to 3 minutes of exercise is essentially a waste of time. Right. Especially if you get that heart rate going up. Right? Acetylcholine and norepinephrine are produced when exercising. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are 2 really important ones because they deal. I don't want to give you that. These 2 neurotransmitters are essential for attention, learning, and memory. True. Okay. So you've got acetylcholine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Okay. A lot of those are. The neat thing about it is they all kick. They help those these neurotransmitters help those neurons fire quickly and effectively and efficiently and get the kids focused. And that's probably why I only saw 3 yawns last week. Well, like I said, there are probably more. Exercise increases student motivation to learn?
False.
Oh! You're that one in the crowd, right?
I'm going to say true.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, again, you might question motivation, but it's that idea of preparing the brain, preparing the body, being focused, wanting to do it. Okay. I mean, just think about when you were young, running on the beach in Southern California, how good you felt. Tell me about that. Okay. Running in the fjords of Kansas.
How about the pasture land?
The pasture land. You have beautiful scenery here. We were driving, and at one point I looked out, and you could see for like 6, 7 miles, and I thought, this is just like Wisconsin. Wisconsin farmland. You know, it was where was it? Right after. Is there a place called Yeah. Okay. And you were at an intersection. Yeah. Nice. Suddenly, I was back in my childhood. Northern Wisconsin. 6 crucial neurotransmitters are released while exercising. Now, keyword as a group in class. Sure. Yeah. Do you want another one, or are you good with one?
I'm good.
You're good with one. Okay. So, yeah, again, there's one I'll add to that. So we said acetylcholine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Have you heard of something called oxytocin?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, the cuddle hormone. Okay, it does more than that, right? Because it's that trust value that we can establish with our students. The more the rapport, the more acetylcholine that kicks in, they found. Okay, and as you're doing exercise as a group, it's fun. Okay, so that I think they're, now again, what I'd love to do is have a point in time when we could hook up our students to an EEG machine or PET scan, and then see things flickering as we're like maybe from the roof, and they're doing all this stuff, and sit down and see what's flickering. But we're not that far yet. But still, my guess from everything that I've read that acetylcholine has to be kicking in. I mean, other things I've read it does. So why not exercising as a group? Right? I'm taking a little stretch there, but I think I would be supportive. All right, quick survey that I took, and this actually stunned me. Because when I started exercising every fall, the very first day, or in the spring and January, springtime and January. Okay, so you get the eye roll, and okay. But 3 weeks into the term, Mr. P, you forgot the exercise. So it almost becomes this addiction. Right? The little survey, it was 3 classes. Do you like the pre-class exercises? 42 said yes, which shocked me because I thought it would be a lot lower than that. Okay. Now, what's interesting is the 4 that said no still thought that there was a benefit. They just didn't like doing it. Okay. So that's where, yeah, did they help you focus mentally in class? 37 yes. Which is interesting. 9 said no because it was the same group of kids. Okay. But maybe they just changed their mind because that second question was further down in the survey. Okay, but still, the majority thought it was doing something good. So, would you like to know what are the pre-class exercises that I do?
Yes.
Okay. Again, these are just basic ones, but you're all very creative people. You can do your own thing and jimmy up the routine, change things up a bit, which we'll talk about in 10 minutes. Okay. So, the happy hall walk. What is the happy hall walk, do you think? You probably already know.
Skipping down the hallway.
Nice! Some of them actually do. Okay. Now again, it depends on what kind of facilities you have in building. I was fortunate enough at my previous school and then at UNL where a lot of my classes are 8 in the morning and they're in the engineering hall where no one else is there. Okay? So I can just literally take them down the hall for 1 to 2 minutes at a fast clip. Okay? Now if the classroom is big enough, what I'll do is I'll have them walk the periphery of the classroom quickly. But where this is added benefit goes back to our second study, the German study of exercising while learning, because what I try to do during that time is review the vocabulary that we studied in the previous class. That could have been the day before or 2 days before. So I'll say, you know, what is juxtaposing? Give me an example. And so they'll shout out, you know, compare and contrast, and you know, she juxtaposed the 2 kinds of BMWs. Okay, obviously a Saudi student. 10 years ago. Now all the Saudi students are driving second-hand Fords. Okay. Have you noticed that? They've changed their... okay. But anyway, so what the happy hall walk, you can jimmy it up and change whatever you want to do, but basically I just take them up and down the hall or around the classroom. But I try to make it learning productive at the same time by either asking them questions about the vocab or something we studied in the previous class, or a big thing that I've been doing recently is observation journals. So what have they noticed in the local culture? It's just something to get them thinking and learning pre-class. Good? Okay, and then the sweet and single Tai Chi, that one we did right when we got in, okay? And you can change that up, you know, do whatever you like. If you forgot what we did, there's a group of teachers down in Florida at TESOL like 5 years ago. I started my session with that. And they said, hey, we want to do this at our school. So I had my students, I was teaching at Western Michigan at the time, and so we made a little video and they posted it on YouTube. So you can just go to that link, and it should be in your handout. And if you forget, you can just go to the link. Okay? You'll see a bunch of smiling Iranians and South Koreans and Saudis. Okay? All right, shake and wake. Let's do that one. Stand up. Okay? All right. This one we won't go through the whole thing, but we'll start. So you count to, you start with your right hand and count to 5 and shake it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you sing it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you got it, right? Okay. So then you just count down to 1. Okay. Now, some of you that were in drama, did you do that in the drama class? That's kind of a warm up from drama. Okay. All right. So you can have a seat. So yeah. Any of these pre-class, you know, we get to the, you know, sometimes I just get them running, and we go through, even if it's a small group and we can't do the hall walk, then while we're doing the running, I'll ask them, okay, what was come up with? How did you use it? What part of speech was it? So we'll kind of go through the review, okay? And then when they're done with that, we'll do some jumping jacks, and we can do it in the circles, or whatever you want. So you can vary it to your own like. Good? Yeah, question.
A question. I know you do this as a beginning to the class,
Right.
but sometimes when you're in the middle of the lesson, that's when I notice that students need to perk up.
During class.
Okay.
Nice. She was a plant. I called her 3 weeks ago saying, at exactly 11:01.
So when you say pre-class, do you start before your class starts?
Yeah, I mean, this semester I was really lucky. I had 3 classes and most kids were there early, like 5 minutes early. They get the classroom set up for me because I have a certain area or setup that I like. So they get the chairs set up, and of course that doesn't happen every semester. Okay, so a lot of times we start, you know, right at 3:30 or 11 o'clock or whatever, and it, you know, it'll take anywhere from a minute to 2 minutes. We'll talk a little bit about it later too. The more we do it, I stand back and I have a student come in and volunteer. And they like leading the class and doing. I had a gal from Colombia just 3 weeks ago. It's great. She shouted, "I want to do push-ups." I mean, you know, she got down. I mean, these Thai guys were like, their biceps were like this, and you know, Ana Maria's were like that. So you know, she kind of showed them up. You know? So during good question, yeah. So that was after I started reading the study. I thought, well, maybe my pre-class isn't enough, you know. And so exercise stations is something I started a while back because it was kind of a tight room and there wasn't a lot of place to exercise. But on day one, I told the students, I said, whenever you feel that need to get up and stretch, use either the left back part of the room or the right part. And that was our exercise station. So it was just an area that they could get up, go back, or you go out into the hall. But you know, you'd hear them running up and down the hall. But the interesting thing, and I'd like to do a study about this, is they all would get up at a very apropos moment in the class. They wouldn't interrupt anything. And I don't know if it was intuitive, but they would get up so there wasn't any distraction, and they'd sit down, and hardly anyone, even at Western Michigan in a lecture hall that I taught at, people in the front row would just get up and go to the back, and no one really noticed. So you'd think it might be disruptive, but it's not really. And it gives them that freedom to think, okay, if I, you know, because you sit down and, you know, they talk about once you sit down for 25 minutes, almost 70, you know, your heart rate goes down considerably, and therefore, you know, there's not a lot of blood going to the brain and not a lot of oxygen going to the brain, and you're sitting, so you're cutting off at least 2 points. So that's when, you know, I used to ask, why aren't my students getting it? I'm like, getting not the information, why aren't the question I should have been asking is, why aren't my students getting oxygen to the brain? So at any rate, yeah, it's just a part of the room, and you can either have them in the back or the hallway. So it's pretty simple. 4-second shower, you want to try it?
Sure.
Okay, stand up. Okay. This is almost like the shake and bake. You're going to clean your entire body in 5 seconds in the shower head. Okay, so ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what part of the body do you really want to wash well today? Armpits. What part do you really want to wash well today? Head. Okay, got it? Okay. Now, what's interesting is I've had 3 colleagues try this. Nobody from basic to university credit classes mentions the private parts. Everybody keeps it clean, and they do the hips and not the butt, you know. But you know, it's just the whole idea that again you're getting that range of motion in, right? You're almost doing, if you do it, you're almost doing a squat, right? Okay, and so you're exercising the body, and you're thinking about, oh, what part next? You're reviewing a little basic vocabulary, depending on your level. Right? Okay, good. Class clap. Okay. So basically, it started again. A lot of these started with just the dynamics of my classroom structure. So again, I was in a class, not a lot of space to exercise. So I took full advantage when a student would say something that was pretty profound or good. I'd have everybody stand up and give a little standing ovation. And the coolest thing was, 3 weeks after I started that, I was reading an article at a neuroscience magazine that said, have your students clap for one another. Here are the neurotransmitters that are elicited during the process. And I'm like, nice. Okay. So there was support for that. But I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're using, you're standing up. You're clapping, but we'll go back to that question on the quiz, the oxytocin one. You know, that's being elicited too, right? And then there's the pride, right? Students giving an answer, it makes them feel good, right? They got the whole classmate, you know, everybody's standing up for them or clapping. And then the classmate, you know, it's a good answer. I mean, for example, just real quick, there was a poem that we interpreted, and it was just about, that difference between a winter snowfall and a spring snowfall. The spring is a lot lighter. So it was about a spring snowfall on an empty robin's nest, and then the wind comes and takes it away. And I had a student from India that said, well, the wind is the representation of the Cultural Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, okay? And how it picked up the snowflakes that are people and got them spinning, and now we're so productive as a race. Okay, so I mean, and of course the whole class went, out of that. I mean, it was sincere. They thought, wow, what an amazing answer, what amazing interpretation. So there's a lot of respect on both parts. And it's not necessarily physical, but there's that emotional content, which is equally, if not more important. Yeah, questions?
So do you usually prompt the clapping, or?
Yeah, a lot of times it is. But sometimes, you know, like the one about the Industrial Revolution, I mean, I had 3 students in the back that got up immediately. And they weren't from India, they were from Malaysia and Oman. Okay, so, good. And then honorable mentions, that, you know, like I said, if you want to just do, you know, use your creativity, jumping jacks. The big one that I put on there was just to get the students, after usually week 2 or week 3, I get the students to come up front. And then I go to the back with everybody else, and they lead, okay? And then a lot of times it'll be variations of what I've taught them, and other times it'll just be their own creation, like Ana Maria's, you know, push-ups, and then clapping push-ups, and I mean, I don't know if she was, you know, training in the services or what. For the first time in, you know, 23 years of teaching, I felt like, wow, this student's teaching me something with this.
Do you ever do those right brain, left brain exercises, like where they're padding or?
Oh, you know, with everything that we're doing, it's pretty much there. The whole right brain, left brain thing is a myth, right? That's been, because we're using the right and left brain all the time. Now there are certain things like language is a little more, you know, the what is it, Wernicke center and the Broca's brain, but like, you know, the amygdala, which, you know, is on the tip of the hippocampus, we got one on the left and one on the right. So just about everything on the left side of the brain is on the right side. So they sell books with that and classroom activities, but yeah.
I don't know if, isn't
the
it
question was different.
right brain controlling the left side of your body?
Right, yeah.
And
So
the left
when we
brain
do that, it's kind of embedded in there. That was your question. I'm sorry. I misinterpreted your question.
And then you did the exercises that when your leg is doing this and your arm.
Right,
That's
yeah,
very,
with the
very,
shower
very
one, or the shaken weight.
No, the Tai Chi exercises when your hands are doing something different from the leg. That's
Right,
very
yeah.
hard. Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay,
the,
right.
and when you go backwards, that's hard for the brain.
Okay. Good question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've got, do I get an extra minute or no?
I think you have about 2 minutes left. No, you have 7 minutes.
Okay, good. I'll just introduce, I think I ran out of them for me, but you've got the little handout with the activity, right? It's got, yeah. So what I often like to do, even though we do, does everybody have that? It's the handout with, it's setting the stage, yeah. Sure. Did you get one of those? No, okay, I can mail you one, I think. Can you share? Okay, good. So, even though we do a lot of physical things in the classroom, at some point in the semester, whatever I'm teaching, whether it's a writing or a speech class, I like them to study the exercise, to see, you know, go more into the research, how it's going to benefit them. So this activity is pretty simple. It's just basically talking about how, you know, it's a class type of activity where we're discussing the benefits of it, or what exercise, how it makes them feel, and then the benefits, okay? And once we've kind of paved the way and set the stage with how it makes them feel and the benefits that they themselves feel, then I like to have them go out on campus. It doesn't have to be a domestic student, it can be anybody, but I like to have them interview 3 women and 3 men, okay? On campus, you know, the American students are always out there running around, or the international students. So they'll come up with a list of questions. I've got some there for you as examples. We'll do a couple in class, and then I'll have them come up with questions on their own. But I do like to check them, okay, so that they're not inappropriate questions, or just, you know, check your grammar and whatnot. And then they'll go out and they'll interview those students, come back, and then we have kind of a data exchange on what they learned. Do the students exercise while they're studying at the rec center, or do they prefer to just focus on the exercise and then go back to study? But they glean a lot of interesting insights about physical activity and how it helps the students study, really. And then I just, if it's a speech class, there'll be a little presentation that they give. If it's a writing-based class, I'll have them just give that 4-paragraph little composition that I have there for you, where the first part, they can bring in, you know, some research, discuss, okay, here are the benefits according to so-and-so, and then here's how the men I interviewed used exercise and how it benefited them. Here's what the women did, and then here's how, so that 4th paragraph is really how that student can then implement those things into his or her own life. So again, we're doing it in class, but I really want them to incorporate it as much as they can. And you know, I've got students now that we'll say that if they're library studying, they're running into an issue with whatever it is, writing that paragraph or solving a calculus problem, they'll just go out, walk around the periphery of the library, come back, and it magically gets solved. I mean, I think about back in college, way back in 1987, when I would run into a problem with whatever paper I was working on at the time, I would walk this mile loop. And it was always amazing because I found out after I graduated that was the most dangerous part of South Beloit. But I didn't know. Practically, you know, you're talking to yourself, okay, so what if Socrates did this? Then people kind of stayed away from me. But it was amazing how I would get back into Pearson's Hall and just start writing again. Now, years later, when I did the reading, there's this whole thing of, again, you know, there's that idiom, we think better on our feet. But it's actually, it's a fact, because you've got the sort of right next to the frontal cortex is your motor cortex, which is in groove with the cerebellum, okay, which deals with the balance, okay, and all those things are working together, and you know, the magic of the neurotransmitters and everything else just gets the thinking process involved. Probably that's at attention again, and while you're walking, you know, it's kind of solving that thing sort of subconsciously while you're in motion again. Okay, so good on the activity. All right, so real quick to wrap up. If you're interested, it's all free, and I will get you in contact with Mike. Mike and his colleagues out in Montgomery College in Maryland put out this really neat quarterly, 4 times a year, okay, so it is a quarterly. But what's neat about it is it's got research, actual activities from class that you can just download and run to class on Monday morning or Friday afternoon. And there are 3 articles in this one about the sort of the theory behind exercise, and then the classroom activities, which is a lot that this session was based on. And then the third one is more research activities. So I've got 3 articles there that you can just download for free and read about. And it's got a lot of different references that you might be interested in as well. Okay. And pitfalls, real quick. So what do you do with the non-participants? I've been lucky at Nebraska because everybody's been into it, but when I was in Michigan, there were some students that hesitated. So what would you do?
Publicly shame them.
Publicly shame them. Yeah, basically we went out in the quad and we stoned them, you know. No, I mean, you know, I would just tell them, you know, you don't have to. Yeah. I mean, there was one gal who wanted to study during that time because we'd have a quiz after the exercise. So I told her, you know, you've got to go out in the hall with us without your notes and just watch us exercise. You can't be in the room studying while we're on. But in most cases, you know, everybody did do it. But any insights on?
I'm wondering about fully hijab-covered savvy women. They're
Right.
not going to talk to men on campus, period. I mean, especially when they first get here.
Right.
And so, and they're not going to want to be publicly, you know, doing that when men are present.
Right.
So do you have any?
Right.
Yeah, so I had 2 individuals like that in Michigan. And yeah, I let them sit down. However, in Southern Illinois, she was the full, I mean, not the bars in the burqa, but everything else was full. She was one of those that wanted to be up front. And she wanted to,
It's very individual.
Yeah. So yeah, it surprised me. You know, I had a stereotype, of course. But yeah, she wanted to lead the class in the exercises. But yeah, the 2 in Western Michigan, I just let them sit. You know, gradually, it was a summer session. Towards the end, they started to participate. They didn't do the whole thing, but they kind of get up and I can see they kind of wanted to start doing it. So that, you know.
It's their drive to compliance competing with their drive to be private.
Right. Yeah. So repertoire, we kind of hit on that before. Students like the routine, but they also like, you know, a little changing of that. Yeah. So, and that's why I think it's really beneficial to have the students come up and do it too, because they'll come up with some neat ones like, instructor comfort level. How many of you would be willing to get up and like? I mean, that's. I think the beauty of this is, you kind of do make a fool of yourself in front of your students, but they see that, and that oxytocin kicks in, and I think
it makes them comfortable too. If you can make a fool out of yourself.
Right. And I mean, and a lot of it, you know, once they get the benefits, I don't want to call it theory, but just the research benefits of exercise, then you've got a hook, line, and sinker. Yeah.
Do you ever use music?
Oh, nice idea. No, but I didn't think of
Because
that.
me,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just saying, like, I got this song, it's in my head, I have this earworm, and I just keep wanting to, you know, and I use a lot of music in my class. So a
Okay.
little 2-minute song with a little movement to it, I mean.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. All these years I've been doing, I didn't think of. But yeah,
There's
dance.
a lot of songs that are very, you know.
Yeah. We'll sing. We'll sing and do it. But that's not the same as.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I might sing, I wouldn't make them sing.
And that goes back to the vocab, because we'll sing the vocab, and you know, if it's a really powerful, emotional one, we'll you know, elongate it and whatnot. But yeah, music is a good idea. So, questions? You've already given them. I do want to hit the references real quick. The top one, Eric Jensen, Brain-Based Learning. It's a real neat one because he does things like the importance of sensory elements in the classroom, physicality. He'll even talk about the need to put plants in your classroom to clean the air. And then Medina is really good. His first chapter there is on the importance of physicality in everybody's life, and they did a real neat study to wrap up here. Just TV watchers, the fidgeters versus the non-fidgeters, and then the testing that went on of the program afterwards. Even just fidgeting, something small like that, the memory was better. So you don't have to run a marathon, just fidgeting helps. And then those 3 articles are the ones that I told you about from the ESL Quarterly that are there. And the point of exercise is to build and condition the brain, not to win gold medals at the Olympics. Thank you. So if you've got any questions, feel free to email, and I'd be more than happy. Or if you've got any neat ideas like music, wing them my way, and we'll try and see what happens. If I sing songs?
Well, I have a whole play, like I work exercise, like playlist of all these, make me want to rock.
Right. It's funny because my wife was born and raised in Turkey, but she's not more.